Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I have 2 o'clock on my phone, so we'll go ahead and get started. This is the webinar to talk to you about the changes that are coming to the Departmental Workflow page in ConnectCarolina. That's as we prepare to get ready for the Concur travel and expense system that we'll be launching. If somebody could just let me know in the chat that you can hear me. I just want to make sure before I keep blabbering on. Okay, perfect. I got at least one message. Perfect. All right, so we'll go ahead and get going. So we are coming at you from all sorts of different locations, making this work at home thing work as best we can. So I will apologize in advance if we hit some speed bumps. This is the first actual webinar that we've done where our panel isn't in the room together. So I just want to level set with you right there from the start. So let's talk about our webinar team. So today we have me, I'm Jackie Treschel. I'm on the ConnectCarolina Change Management team, and I'm going to walk through the presentation. And then because I am by no means an expert at this, I do have some support on here as well. I have Rebecca Spanos, who is the Travel and Payment Card Services Manager in Finance and Operations. And then from the ConnectCarolina Finance side, I have Becky Arnold and Priya Hariharan. So they are all on the phone. I didn't know, ladies, if you wanted to unmute and say hello real quick, just for the voices.
Hello. This is Rebecca.
Hey, Rebecca.
Hey, this is Priya.
Hi, Priya.
Hi, Jackie. It's Becky.
Hey, Becky. All right, so those are the voices that'll be joining us when you guys have the hard questions that I don't know the answers to. So let's talk a little bit about today's format. If you've attended one of our ConnectCarolina webinars before, this is going to follow the same format that we always do, which is a presentation, and it's followed by a question and answer session at the end. We're going to use the chat window. If you need to ask a question, just go ahead and put it in the chat window, and I'll keep track of them, and we'll answer those at the end of the presentation in the order that they came in. Because we are so spread out and I don't have a separate moderator in here today, if you could avoid using the Q&A panel that you see up there that Zoom allows you to do, and just put everything in the chat, that would be best so that I can be able to track it all at the same time. And unlike some of the other presentations, I'm not going to stop and answer questions as we go, because when we did a couple of run-throughs with this, it turned out that all of the questions got answered before the end of the presentation. So I just want to be able to go through the information, and then we'll circle back to any of those questions at the end. And then if you have to jump off at any point, I think the presentation's probably about 10 or 15 minutes, but we are recording the presentation, and it'll be posted on CC Info later today or tomorrow once we get it all squared away and get the closed captioning on there for accessibility purposes and whatnot. So without further ado, let's get started. Today's subject, if you've been on a webinar with me before, you know I like to just give it to you in a nutshell. So our nutshell today is a fairly large one, but in short, we're getting ready for a new travel and expense system called Concur, and that's going to eventually replace web travel completely at the university. So web travel will be going away, and we'll be moving to Concur. Then before we go live with Concur for anybody, we needed to add some new fields on the Departmental Workflow page, which is where you'll be able to specify travel and expense approvers for when your unit is onboarded into Concur. A little more information about that right now. What happens on the Departmental Workflow page when you see those new fields in there, it's only for Concur. It's not going to affect anything you do in web travel. So if you need approvers for web travel between now and when your unit is onboarded into Concur, you're still going to use Fred the same way you do today. So nothing is changing with any of your business processes right now. We just wanted to let you know about the new fields before you saw them in ConnectCarolina, and then, you know, we're worried that here's new fields and you don't know what to do with them. So let's keep moving. The timing of these changes, so again, this is just seeing these new fields. It's going to be this Friday, April 24th. So when you get to your couch, presumably, or your home office on Friday morning and log into ConnectCarolina, if you go to the Departmental Workflow page, regardless of what unit you're in, you'll see those fields if you have access to the Departmental Workflow page. But until your unit is onboarded into Concur, all you have to do is ignore those fields. So a lot of what I'm telling you today, there are 3 units that are part of a pilot that we're doing. Those units are Keenan Flagler Business School, the Department of Athletics, and University Development. So they'll be going first. They have a little bit separate information about how to use these fields when it goes live, and they already have their information. But for you, if you're not in one of those 3 groups, you can just ignore almost everything that I'm telling you today, including those fields when you see them on the Departmental Workflow page. So let's talk a little bit about the Concur travel and expense system. I don't know how much you already know about the system, but it is a web-based travel and expense management system that's going to manage your pre-trip travel requests and approvals. So that's sort of like what's happening with cabs right now. So before travel happens, you need to get approval to do so. And then it will also handle the expense report, creating those and then sending those through the approval process, as well as we have a new travel and expense card, which you'll hear referred to as a T&E card that's coming, that's part of this Concur system. And you'll be able to reconcile the transactions on your T&E card within Concur. Some additional advantages of that is that Concur is pretty easy to use. It comes with a lot of functionality. There's a mobile app that's associated with it that you can scan receipts and put them right into Concur. If you have a travel and expense card that you're using, those transactions are going to go straight in there. It's going to reduce the out-of-pocket expense that that most people that travel on behalf of the university are going to have to incur. But it will also allow us to have a little bit better control of the spending, reduce the likelihood of expense fraud. And then one of the really great things, because Concur is a global company, is that there's an online system that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you're traveling overseas when we're allowed to travel again, and you have a question or need to do something in the system, you're able to do that at the time. And we are going to provide more information about Concur in the coming months. So this isn't the only time you're going to hear about it and you need to remember everything. So just, we wanted to give you a little bit of background about what Concur was in case you hadn't heard about it, so that it makes sense that why we're talking about adding these fields. So let's talk about the approvers that you're going to need in Concur and then how you specify them. So what's going to happen with Concur is that there's 2 sides of Concur that you're going to need to work in. There's a request side, so that's before the trip happens. So that's what's going to replace cabs right now. So that's getting your approval to travel. And on the request side, there's 2 types of approvers that will be set up in Concur. One is called a designated approver. The other one is a business office approver. So once you've got your travel and you're all ready to go, then you get to do your travel. It's on our graph here, it's the smallest of the 3, but we all know that that's really the largest part. And then the second side of Concur is the expense side. And that's when you come back from traveling, you're going to be able to fill out your expense report, send it on through its approval, get reimbursed as needed. That's the part that's replacing web travel. And then on that side as well, you'll notice that it's the same type of approver. There's a designated approver and a business office approver on that side as well. So now you're probably wondering, what the heck is a designated approver and what's a business office approver, and how are they different and how are they the same? Well, I'll tell you. So the designated approver is the person that's going to approve the travel. It can be somebody in the business office, but it doesn't need to be. but you are going to have to enter one person for a request. So that, again, that's the request to travel, and one person for the expense side. That's after you come back for your expense report. The business office approver, is the person that approves the funding for the travel. So that's the person that's going to make sure that the Chartfield string is correct on the request and the expense side. You have to have one person for the request side and one for the expense side. However, it can be the same person. So depending on how your unit is set up, you may have the same person as the designated approver and the business office approver for request and expense. So they'll be the designated approver in 4 places. One thing that's important to know when it comes time, and again, this isn't stuff you have to remember right now, but is that you can only specify one person for each of these. So if you have a larger unit and you have multiple approvers for travel on the request side and the expense side, you'll need to have one person listed, potentially say your campus unit finance lead could be listed as that approver, and then you delegate those approvals to other people within Concur. But Concur only allows us to send one person as an approver from ConnectCarolina into Concur. So let's take a look at how those screens are going to look. So the Departmental Workflow page, this is what it looks like, so this shouldn't be surprising to you. And you see down at the bottom, underneath where Source Create currently is, there's going to be 4 new fields. So it's Concur Request Designated, Concur Request Business Office, and then the same thing for Concur Expense, Designated and Business Office. For this, you won't really need to do anything at the top of the page. At the bottom of the page is where you'll see there's 4 new columns to the side, and this is sort of a torn page here because, as you can imagine, that page is already pretty wide. Adding 4 new columns makes it even wider. So they'll be at the very end, and it's Request Designated in Business Office, and then Expense Designated in Business Office. And keep in mind, when it comes time, only one person can be checked in those columns. So for instance, we could have my column 1 here, or my row 1, Denise Trainer is there. She could be the person that's checked for all of those, and then within Concur, she'd be able to go in and delegate those approvals out to other people in her team and that sort of thing. All right, so moving on, we've already heard some questions. As I mentioned, we have the 3 pilot groups, and so they've already asked a couple of questions that it's important to talk about now, just to go ahead and level set. So the first one was, am I required to assign approvers on both the request and expense side? The answer is yes. You have to assign approvers on both sides, request and expense, but you can assign the same person to each one if you need to. Just keep in mind you can only assign one person. And what if I need multiple approvers? So as I mentioned, Concur only allows us to send one approver into Concur from the Departmental Workflow, and if you need more than one person to approve at a stop, which we recommend that you do that. If you have one approver listed and they're, in the Bahamas when we're allowed to travel again, then nobody's travel is getting approved while that person's traveling. Or if somebody's sick, we need to have more than one person, but you'll be able to go in and set up delegates to do that, and we're going to share all that information on how to do that before your group is onboarded. And what if someone else, like a supervisor, needs to approve a request before it goes to the designated approver? So that type of approver can be set up in Concur on an as-needed or on a default basis. And so, that would be something like, for our department, all travel has to be approved by our ABC. But if on our team, my supervisor, Anita, says, no, she wants to see all travel requests before it happens, I would be able to go in and add her as an approver so that all of my travel requests went to Anita before they eventually went on to the designated approver, who, you know, potentially will be Michelle, who is our interim ABC for ConnectCarolina. And that's it. So just to wrap up, we're getting ready for a new travel and expense system, and eventually it's going to replace web travel, cabs, and Fred. And we're adding those new fields in the departmental workflow page so that you can specify travel and expense approvers once your unit is onboarded. And web travel is not impacted at all by adding these fields. So if you need to designate approvers in web travel before your group goes to Concur, you still need to use Fred the same way you do today. And the big thing for right now is that you can ignore these fields until your group is onboarded into Concur. All right, and with that, some questions. I saw a couple come in as I was talking, so let me go back. We have a question from Mike, and this is, I think, going to be a Rebecca question because I do not know the answer. Will we still be able to access web travel for viewing purposes only, or will it be eliminated?
So I know the answer in the short term is that we will obviously still have web travel because there will be a significant transition for everyone as they come out of web travel and into Concur. So it won't simply, you know, go away, you know, on a given day and you have to use Concur for everything and you can no longer access it. However, once we have passed the transition point where everyone is entering their expense reimbursements in Concur, I don't know what the longevity is that we will have the ability to access web travel for information. But we will definitely take that as a takeaway, something that we need to be in consideration of so that we can make sure we have an answer to that question.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. And then actually, Rebecca, you probably want to stay unmuted.
Yes, I did.
How many people can you delegate to in Concur?
So it's unlimited. You can delegate as many folks as you'd like to help manage that approval process. And there's certain, you know, different permissions and functionalities that you can leverage. So in some cases, you may simply want to delegate to someone on a temporary basis because, like in Jackie's example, you're going on vacation and you don't want that approval process to stop just because you're out of the office. So you can actually set up a temporary approver in your absence and give them a specific time frame during which they are approving on your behalf. You can also set up previewers in Concur. So a previewer is someone who will be able to see your approval workflow, and they will be able to mark any requests or expense reports as reviewed, but they would not be doing the approval on your behalf. They would just be doing the preview and then marking it as ready for you to come in and finish reviewing and officially approve. And then there's people that you can set up permanently as approval delegates. And again, there is not a limit on the number of who you can set up on your profile, but just know that the complete workflow list would appear to anyone that is set up as a delegate, because what happens in the system is those people that have delegate access log in as themselves into Concur, and then they choose to act on behalf of someone who they have delegate access to. So they, you know, let's say Jackie was an approver in the system and she set me up as her delegate. I would log in as Rebecca, but then I would act on behalf of Jackie, so then I would have access to everything in Jackie's queue. So as you're setting up delegates, you'll also have to determine internally how you're going to be managing that workload and that approval queue.
Great, thank you. Okay, from Susie, just to make sure I'm understanding, I can assign one person in Department Workflow for request and expense, but I will be able to log into Concur and set up multiple delegates. Yes, that's exactly correct. Mm-hmm. And your nutshell was much smaller, Susie. I really appreciate that. And then, what is the path to this page in ConnectCarolina? I don't want to misspeak, so Becky or Priya, if you can unmute.
This is under the finance menu under UNC Campus, but the easiest way to get to it is from the Finance Work Center. Work Center under General Finance, there's a link to Departmental Approvers page.
Perfect, thank you. And then how soon after a person is added in department workflow as approvers will it be available in Concur? And then there's a follow-up question to that.
Let me take the first half and I might let Rebecca confirm the second half. So nightly, you go in and by business unit and department, set up the approvers for each combination. So that feeds over nightly to Concur. If for some reason you did it after the nightly export at 5, it might take up to 1 day, but every night we'll send the data from the departmental workflow pages over to Concur and it'll be loaded. And so any new travel document that used that business unit and department would take that set of approvers.
And just to follow up on what Becky said, it will not necessarily update the approvers for something that's already in the approval queue.
Right.
But it would apply to anything newly submitted. So just note that something's already, again, Jackie as an example, something's already in her queue to approve, and we decide we want to shift that approval away from Jackie and over to Becky. It's not going to remove it from Jackie's queue. It would just update any future submissions to Becky for approval. However, that can be manually accomplished in the background should it need to be. Regarding the delegates and how they receive approvals after they have been added as a delegate. So the delegates will have immediate access to the approval queue to which they've been assigned as a delegate for. So when they're going in and they're saying, I want to act on behalf of this person, anything that's already in that person's queue, they would immediately have access to. Now, one of the delegate permissions that you can provide is whether or not you want that delegate to receive the approval emails that are generated from the system. And so they wouldn't get any kind of back copies of emails that had already been sent out, but they would receive any new communications in the future once they've been added to the system.
Great, thank you. Rebecca, I think the next one is for you as well. This appears to be different from what happens now if a traveler doesn't require a cab. What happens if the traveler takes the trip and incurs all expenses and then submits?
That is a great question. So Concur Request is the process by which all travelers will be going in to request approval to go on their trip. So it's the pre-travel authorization process. And per our requirements from the state of North Carolina, this is required for any overnight travel because we have to have pre-travel approval in place in order to be eligible to submit for lodging and per diem reimbursements. So what we are trying to accomplish with Concur Request is not only to replace the CABS process for those people that may not have a need for their own individual T&E card and might still want to leverage the use of the university's ghost cards for booking their airline tickets, but we also want to be able to help all of our different units across campus not have to have additional processes in the background by which their employees are submitting for approval to go on trips. So Concur Requests will hopefully be integrating, all of those travel approvals into one system to really make it that one-stop shop from I want to go on this trip and I need to get approval to do so to the end result of here are my T&E card transactions and out-of-pocket expenses that I'm then reconciling for payment and reimbursement.
Great, thank you. Next question, when do we expect Concur to go live?
So we had hoped, the original plan was that we would actually have already launched our pilot phase last week. But unfortunately, because we're all telecommuting and because no one's traveling right now, it doesn't make sense to be launching a new travel product, both the cards and the software tool, until we're back on campus and the travel prohibition has been lifted. So right now, we are targeting mid-July for the launch of our pilot phase. We also don't want to do this right on top of fiscal year end and add too much workload to a lot of people's already very full lists. So we are targeting, again, mid-July for the launch of the pilot phase. And if all goes well and we can get enough robust data and folks traveling, we are then looking at the mid-fall, probably October, to start the phased rollout to campus.
Great, thank you. Next question, will we be able to set up different approvers by business unit, i.e. foundation?
I can take that one. Yes, just like you can for the other travel types that you already use Workflow in ConnectCarolina, the key to get to that page that Jackie showed is business unit and department. Most of us default to UNCCH, but if you wanted to set up approvers for CH Med or whatever business unit and a particular department, you would just go in and add that in.
Great, thank you. Will historical travel documents be transferred into Concur?
No, they will not.
Okay. And then if people from other departments travel on your department's funds, will that be accommodated in Concur for approval?
Yes. So the way that the approval workflow is going to function, everyone will have a default business unit and department combination on their profile. And that is information that we are getting directly from the HR system. So whatever your home department is, that will be on your profile, and that will automatically populate onto your requests, and then down the road onto your expense reports as well. So what will happen is when we are only making business unit and department required fields. So when the end user, the traveler, or their delegate wants to submit or wants to prepare and then have the traveler submit those requests and expenses, they don't have to know the full chart field string, because we know so many of our travelers do not know that information. So it will automatically go to the designated approver based on their home department if that has not been changed. And then when it gets to the business office, if they update the chart field string to a different area that they are not necessarily an approver for, then that chart field string change will update the workflow as well. So it will start in that home department or whatever the department is listed on the header of the report. And then any changes to the chart field string could populate in additional approvers as needed.
Great, thank you. Another question, currently I'm submitting travel reimbursements for my department and my supervisor approves the action. Can we use a similar workflow process in Concur? I would still like to be able to do submissions and have my supervisor sign off.
So on the submission piece of it, Mike, there is going to be a change in how that works. So there's two different types of delegates that can be leveraged in Concur. One we've already touched on, which is the ability to delegate approvals. The other functionality is to delegate, for assistance that you need help. You need help in creating your Concur request and your Concur expense reports. So end users, our travelers, will be able to go in and assign personal delegates who they want to be able to act on their behalf and help them with setting up those requests and reports for submission into the system. The one change, however, is that the delegates cannot submit on the end user's behalf. So they can do all of the preparation, they can fill everything out, but they cannot actually submit it into the approval queue. We want this to be a much more user or end user integrated experience, and we want those that have the ability to take care of themselves self-service to do so, which can't currently do in web travel. So we are leveraging that ability in Concur to where all of our end users will actually be submitting their requests and expense reports into the approval queue. So you'll still be able to assist your travelers, you just won't be able to submit it on their behalf. And then regarding the supervisor being a part of the approval workflow, if they are set up as the designated approver or business office approver in ConnectCarolina, then obviously they would be part of that approval workflow. If they need to be an additional step in addition to those two workflow steps that you're assigning in ConnectCarolina, you could also have them added to individuals' profiles as their default approver, and they would become the first step on the workflow for that end user, and then it would go on to designated approver and business office approver.
Great, thanks. I'll give you a break as I'm reading this next one. Will delegates receive approval emails?
They can. So that is a permission setting. They don't have to receive approval emails, but if they want to or you want them to, you can turn on that permission.
Okay. And then if the primary approver, the person designated in ConnectCarolina, travels, will their approval and expense report be auto-approved, or will their delegates still be able to review and approve? Great question.
So it wouldn't be auto-approved. they will not, and it will not come to them for approval. So it will look for a next higher level approval person, because obviously we don't want our end users having the ability to approve their own items. But it also would not go to their delegates, because in order for the delegates to have access to it, it has to be in that primary approver's approval queue. And if they are the traveler, it won't be in their approval queue.
Okay. Will approvers and delegates be able to review actions that were submitted in the system prior to them being added to their delegate or approval role?
So on the delegate side, delegates would have access to anything outstanding in the approver's queue. So as long as something is sitting there waiting for approval, then they would have access to it. They would also have the ability to look at anything that had been previously approved as well, just by doing different search and filter options. Approvers, prior to being added to the system, would not have anything in their queue. Only things that are newly submitted or resubmitted would then flow to them for approval.
Okay. Can the submitter and approver be the same for the new Concur travel reimbursement request?
I think the answer is no. So approvers won't be approving their own submissions. The system will not allow it, if that was the question.
Actually, yeah, I think though the question, and Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the question is if you're submitting for somebody else, can it be the approver that is the one submitting?
And that functionality doesn't exist. So no one can submit on behalf of another end user. All end users have to submit on their own. So there would never be that situation of someone submitting on another person's behalf and being their approver.
Right. Okay. Let me see. We got a couple of thank yous. And then how will Concur handle non-hotel lodging requests like Airbnb?
Great question. So we still have allowances for third-party lodging like Airbnb and VRBO. We will still be looking for the approved third-party lodging authorization form to be uploaded into the system to substantiate that was a cost savings or why the end user chose to stay in one of those types of lodgings and not a traditional lodging establishment.
Okay. And then let me see, follow up to the question below. Is it expected that the actual traveler will input this request prior to taking the trip? Our physicians rotate to the Fayetteville VA monthly on different days, some even going on their administrative day. We reimburse the mileage monthly. This appears to be different than what happens now if a traveler doesn't require a cab. What happens if the traveler takes the trip and incurs all the expenses, then submits? It is unclear what would be gained if we add an extra pre-approval step to reimburse mileage on a monthly or even quarterly basis.
That's a great question. So we will not be looking for a request to be submitted if it's not for overnight travel. It's only required if the traveler is going to be incurring lodging and or per diem expenses that the state requires us to have pre-travel approval in place. So if someone's just incurring, monthly mileage, or if they are someone who has a T&E card that they're using, for local business entertainment expenses, then we would not expect them to have a request. They could simply start at the expense report step. And so they would be, starting from a blank expense report instead of pulling in information from the request side of things. But that is completely anticipated and part of the process. There will be a number of expense reports that do not require requests to have been submitted prior to.
Okay, great. Since the traveler will be submitting the expense, does this mean the travel acknowledgement form will no longer be required?
That's correct. Since they'll be the ones, they'll have complete access to their requests and expense reports that they should be obviously reviewing if they were not the person to have entered it into the system. And there'll be a couple different acknowledgements that they will be asked to read and accept when they submit. But that's correct. The acknowledgement form will no longer be required.
Okay. Are there any reporting tools available in Concur to export travel information for our accounting records?
Absolutely. I actually sat through 9 hours of training last week on Concur Intelligence, which is a very robust reporting tool that is powered by IBM Cognos. So we have not even kind of gotten the tip of the iceberg on what will be available, but yes, there will be reporting access available, both for anyone set up as an approver in the system, and then we'll also have the ability to add some people around campus as needed with access to reporting, even if they're not approvers in the system.
Okay. Will the third-party lodging process form requirement be a part of the pre-approval request? To ask it another way, will the system remind those who are submitting a request that pre-approval of third-party lodging is required?
That is a good question, Mark. I don't think we have it set up at the moment to remind travelers on the request side that pre-approval is required. It's just sort of a known business process that they should be obtaining that approval in advance. But that's a good point and something that we should actually think about configuring. So I'm going to take a note on that and see what we can do to really support that pre-approval process.
Okay. And then how will Concur handle business versus personal memo approvals? Will those also be uploaded, or is that a step in the Concur authorization process?
So that is a step on the Concur request side. So when you are filling out your request, which, again, is your pre-travel approval process, there is a section that says, will this trip include any personal days of travel? And if you select yes, then you'll be asked to provide those days of personal travel in addition to what you've already entered for your business travel. So that will all be encompassed in the request process.
Okay, and then we did get a couple in the Q&A box over here flashing at me. Let me see, the first one, I think we just answered that, reporting tool, yes. The next one, are online classes, courses going to be considered travel to be requested and paid through Concur?
I'm going to lean towards no. I think those would probably be better served on a P card than on the T&E card or through a travel and expense reimbursement process, because there's no travel associated with them.
Okay, and then it looks like, what about registration? Still put them on the P card question.
So conference registrations or registrations in general could actually go on either the T&E card or the P card. So for instance, if you are the traveler and you're going to a conference and you have a T&E card, we would encourage you to put all allowable expenses on your own card, because it will just make the reconciliation process that much more simple. However, if you're an infrequent traveler that doesn't have a business need to have a T&E card, they will still be allowable purchases to be made on the departmental P cards.
Okay. Another question, are there plans to use Concur for business expenses other than travel?
So at the moment, Concur will be used for travel and business entertainment expenses. So for any folks that have, business entertainment expenses, that are in compliance with policy 1263, so business meetings, catering, things of that nature, that can all migrate out of campus voucher and potentially off the P card. It'll still be allowable on the P card, but can also be served on the T&E card as well. But at the moment, we're not adding any other out-of-pocket expense reimbursements to Concur. The P card will continue to remain reconciled through Bank of America Works, and so not brought into the Concur system at present, but that could always change down the road.
Okay. Are the plans to give all employees, business travelers, their own UNC T&E card?
That will be up to business units to decide. Business units, department approvers. Our guidance will be that obviously it's just like the P card, they have to be a UNC employee. The other extra requirement on the T&E card side is that we are requiring T&E card applicants to be at least 21 years of age or older. But as long as they meet both those requirements and the department or business unit is in support of them getting a T&E card, then they are welcome to apply for and receive the card.
Okay. What are the plans to recall the Diners Club cards?
Another good question. So we've spoken to Diners Club because we wanted to make sure we understood from their perspective if Diners Club card holders could maintain their card and continue a personal relationship with Diners Club. And their answer was no, that they do consider all the Diners Club accounts to be part of a corporate account setup. And since university will be terminating our affiliation with Diners Club, by business unit, as we roll out the new T&E cards, we will work with that business unit to determine a point in time at which the Diners Club cards that are held within that unit will be canceled.
Okay. And then last question in the Q&A section over here. Will Concur link with the International Travel Registry and request international travel insurance?
Very good question. So we are working closely with the Global Travel Office, and there will likely be some changes coming to their area that we are doing our best to integrate into the Concur process of Concur Request. I don't have any definitive answers on that yet. They are still working on those changes. But to short-term answer the original question, Concur Request does not integrate with the Global Travel Registry. But again, there are changes coming down the road for the Global Travel Office, so there could be different opportunities to leverage the Concur Request information in the future.
Okay, and then back to the chat window. It looks like I skipped one. Will travelers be required to complete training before they have access to the system?
So just simply on the Concur side of things, there will be a lot of training available, but they will not be required to have completed any specific training. They would immediately have access to log into the system and begin using it should they so choose. Now for T&E card account holders, there will be a training and subsequent quiz, just like with the P card, that they will have to complete and successfully pass the quiz before their T&E card will be issued to them.
Okay. Will non-employee and affiliate travel, like guest speakers, job candidates, require pre-approval?
So we have not yet established the exact processes for non-employee affiliate travel in Concur. We are still working on that process. So I don't have an exact answer for you there yet. In the short term, we'll still be able to utilize cabs for our non-employees and affiliate travel to be able to book their airfare on the Ghost card. And we'll have more information on guest travel in Concur soon.
Okay. And then a similar question, will Concur be used to pay for interviewees or invited speakers?
Yeah, TBD on that one. We are working on it fast and furiously.
Okay. And then just to clarify, if the person traveling is the approver, that is the one recorded in the Departmental Workflow page in ConnectCarolina, will the approver be able to delegate another approver in order for this delegate to approve the approver's travel? For example, Sally is recorded as all approvers in ConnectCarolina on the Departmental Workflow page. When she travels, who will approve her travel?
It will depend on how it is set up, but in short, it will look up kind of the food chain for the next appropriate approver and choose that one, because again, no one will be approving their own travel in the system.
Okay. Will alcohol be allowed on the T&E card?
Yes, as long as the funding source is appropriate per policy 1263.
Okay. Will university affiliates receive cards? We have many healthcare affiliates who travel for university business.
And that will depend on what their status is with the university and whether or not they are considered a university employee in order to be eligible for a T&E card. So I think in some cases the answer might be yes, but not in all cases.
Okay. Will the T&E card also be issued by Bank of America?
Yes, it will.
Okay. It is important to note on the T&E card looks completely different from the P card.
Yes, thank goodness.
So if you are somebody that will have a T&E card and the P card as well, it looks completely different. So it's something that you would risk misusing or accidentally using the wrong one. Will students be able to use Concur?
Yes. So we are all faculty, staff, and a strong majority of student employees are automatically going to be loaded into Concur when we launch it by campus unit. Those students who are not employees or not full-time employees, so like, your part-time bookstore employee, for instance, they will not be automatically loaded initially into the system, but similar to guest travel, we are working out all of the nuances to get them into Concur so that it will be, the one-stop shop for all student and guest and employee travel.
Okay, great. I have one last question here. What if I have a department chair that will not use this system and will continue to use his personal card and submit for reimbursement after the trip is over. Will their process no longer allow them to be reimbursed?
So they'll still be able to be reimbursed. We would encourage that department chair, though, with the T&E card, it truly limits the out-of-pocket expenses that they have to carry, because the T&E card can be used for the vast majority of their travel expenses. Really, the only limitations, or the primary limitations, are personal meals, because those always have to be paid for out of pocket, and then you submit for the appropriate per diem reimbursement. And then if you're driving your personal vehicle, the mileage reimbursement. But the T&E card can be used for virtually everything else. So your airline tickets, your conference registrations, hotels, should you have a need for a rental car, ground transportations, the list goes on and on. If they are wanting to maintain using their personal card and pay for all of that out of pocket, then they have to front the cost of all of those transactions until the trip is complete. The state does not allow us to reimburse in advance of travel. But if they're using the T&E card, then the only out-of-pocket expenses they have to can't talk today, incur, not concur, but incur, are those minimal ones over the course of the trip itself, and which they can then immediately submit for reimbursement on.
Okay. Thank you. The next one from Saucony, perhaps this isn't the right forum, but can you speak to any efforts to cut down on the fraud we're seeing on Bank of America P cards? Almost every P card holder in my department has to have their card replaced every 2 to 3 months due to fraud, but we don't believe it has to do with their use.
It's very frustrating, and we know, unfortunately, card hackers get more and more smart every single day. They are literally people just sitting out there running numbers against credit card expiration dates and CVVs, just trying to get a match. And so sometimes it is completely random fraud that has nothing to do with anything that the P card holder has done wrong or any place that they have shopped. But in some cases, it's also merchants that are getting incredibly hacked. So, I would love to say that yes, the chip and pin technology we know has cut down a lot on the amount of fraud that was happening on in-person purchases, because it is much harder now to duplicate a card and use it fraudulently for an in-person purchase. But then that has simply allowed for the ramping up of online and internet fraudulent purchases to be occurring. So I wish I had a better answer for that one, but it's just something that we have to continue to work through.
Okay, and then this one's more of a comment than a question. Employees like to use their personal cards so that they can earn points or whatever benefit their cards are providing, like miles, etc.
Yep, and just, to put a reminder out there, the state does require that if you are earning any miles or points on business travel, then they do tell you that you are supposed to use those miles and points for business travel in the future, not for your own personal gain. So, again, the T&E card will be that incredibly helpful tool so that they don't have to front all these costs out of pocket, and they don't have to wait to submit for reimbursement until the completion of a trip. So we'll be strongly encouraging anyone who is traveling or traveling frequently to have that T&E card, just because it really cuts down on the burden of having to submit all of those transactions from out-of-pocket expenses on their expense report at the completion of their trip.
Okay. Will meals reimbursement in Concur be allowed to be a lesser amount than the per diem?
So the way that we currently have it set up, and it was a bit tricky to configure, because North Carolina having its own per diems and they being dependent on departure times, we have preloaded the exact amounts for breakfast, lunch, and dinner into the system. But that's a great question. If somebody doesn't want to request the full amount, they want to request less, would they be able to do so? We don't have it currently set up to support that, but that's another note I'm going to take away to our configuration team to see how we might want to rearrange that configuration to allow for those lesser amounts.
Okay, and then another question, actually thinking about per diem, how will Concur handle federal per diem rates?
Thankfully, the federal per diem rates are much easier to accomplish in Concur. So with that, there is a daily allowance wizard that you use. And the wizard is something that goes out to the GSA website, or it goes out to the Department of State website and pulls in the correct amounts based on the dates and location of travel. So it does all of the work for you. And what you then simply have to do is you put in your dates of travel, and then any meals that were provided, and thusly you're not requesting per diem for, you simply check the box to remove them from your per diem request. And it is an incredibly slick and easy way to put those into the system. Now, of course, we want to make sure that people requesting federal per diem, or the daily allowance as Concur calls them, have the appropriate funding in place to be eligible for them. But so long as they do, it's a very, very easy way to enter that information into the system.
Okay. What if someone only has $1,000 funding for a particular trip? How can Concur limit this?
So Concur is not going to have any information on budgets. You know, that's going to be information that our end users and our approvers will have. But Concur does have the ability to allocate the, either complete transactions or a complete report, or pieces of transactions or pieces of a report to different Chartfield strings. So if someone only has $1,000 funding for a particular trip or for a particular budget, then it's going to be incumbent upon that traveler or their approvers to have this information and to help them process that properly in Concur.
Okay. And then does Concur do the foreign exchange rate conversions to US dollars?
Yes, this is another really amazing feature of the system. What it will do is, based on the transaction date and location of the purchase, the system will automatically pull in the average daily rate from the OANDA database to properly convert that transaction to US dollars for you.
Okay. And then we have one more question, and before I read it, we are running a little bit short on time. We have about 8 minutes left. And so I just wanted to remind everybody that there's a lot more information about Concur coming before your unit is onboarded. Some of these questions are great, and I've been in a fair amount of presentations to this point about Concur and haven't heard some of these, so these are great questions that help us build out like the training and the frequently asked questions and whatnot. But I do want to make sure that everybody understands that this isn't the only time that you're going to hear about Concur and have an opportunity to ask these questions. The big deal for today's presentation was about those new fields that you're going to see on the Departmental Workflow page. So with that sort of disclaimer there, we will keep answering questions, Rebecca, if you're okay.
Yep.
Until 3 o'clock. All right.
Eventually they'll get tired of hearing me talk, Jackie, and they'll stop asking questions.
Next question, will this system allow for international travel with higher cost or high expense locations in reimbursing a traveler?
And I think that's probably just going to be a one-on-one question. It's just really going to depend on the funding source and the circumstances of that travel. But yes, I mean, the system does allow for a lot of room. We've built in certain rules that have to comply with our travel policies, but we'll still be able to work with the system and with the tool to make allowances and exceptions when necessary or when appropriate.
Okay. Can we add Chartfields in Concur?
So all Chartfields will be automatically loaded into Concur. So you'll have the ability to choose business unit, department, fund, source, program, on down the line. All of that information will be pre-populated into Concur. And Becky, correct me if I'm wrong, but will be updated daily if there are changes?
Yep, it'll be updated nightly. Yep.
Okay. Do you know what will happen if an expense is approved in Concur, but it later fails budget check for some reason? Will it default to state funds the way web travel does?
And Becky can probably answer this more from the technical side of things, but we will be leveraging CBM for Concur. So when an expense report is fully approved in Concur and it exports, it will flow through CBM before it gets to PeopleSoft. And my understanding is that if for some reason it fails in any way, that there will be a default Chartfield string set up in CBM for Concur specifically.
Yep, we will. It won't just default to the state default. We will have a new travel default in CBM that each department will be able to specify, and it would hit that Chartfield string.
Okay. Mike said, okay, that makes sense to me, thanks.
You're
Will
welcome.
one be able to choose favorites in Chartfields or otherwise designate defaults?
Yes, you can save favorites to your profile and then be able to use those on future requests and reports.
Okay, and then I have another question that came into the Q&A box. If someone goes over budget, what are the options for repaying UNC? Will this be linked through Concur with payroll or able to deposit from the bank account that is set up on their UNC account that receives pay, or would it still go through the UNC cashier?
So we are going to be leveraging payroll in conjunction with Concur, so that if you submitted something, and it's more going to be on the use of the T&E card. So if your T&E card was used for something that it shouldn't have been or was out of policy, and thusly your department or the university needs you to repay those, what's going to happen is the system will aggregate that against any out-of-pocket reimbursements that you're submitting it with first. So say you had $50 on your T&E card that you shouldn't have, but you've got $100 in out-of-pocket expense reimbursements, you'll simply get $50 in reimbursement instead of the full 100, and that sort of repays the original 50. But if you've got $50 in unallowable charges and you've got $0 in expense reimbursements, then that $50 would then be sent over to payroll to process in the next available pay run.
Okay. Will a budget error in Concur stop my check for reimbursement?
I believe the answer is no, and Becky, back me up on this, because it'll go to CVM first, and if there's a budget error, CVM will assign a Chartfield string that won't be in budget error so that it can process the reimbursement.
Yep, we're not technically doing a budget check from Concur, so we'll send it over to CVM and it would validate that it was a valid Chartfield string and send it on.
And just to clarify on the reimbursements as well, we are going to be leveraging direct deposit for employees. So reimbursements will be sent directly to the bank account you have in place for payroll. So no more paper checks.
Okay. So I think this will be the last question. So will all Concur transactions go on CVM or just the problem ones with budget error issues?
All of them will. That'll be the process. The journal will be created technically in CVM. If there is nothing wrong with the Chartfield string that you've allocated in Concur, that'll be the Chartfield string used. It would only replace it if there was a budget problem or an invalid combination of Chartfields.
Okay, great. So, I mean, technically we have 2 minutes left, but I didn't see any more come in. So we'll just go ahead and wrap it up. As I mentioned before, if you had to jump off or jump back on at some point, this is recorded and we will be posting it to ccinfo.unc.edu, again, either later today or by tomorrow. If you have questions, you can definitely email us at cc_communications@unc.edu. But just, keep in mind on the Concur side, you will be getting a lot more information before your unit is onboarded. As Rebecca mentioned, the plan is to start mid-July for the 3 pilot groups, and then sometime in the fall with a phased rollout beyond. But you will see those new fields on the Departmental Workflow page starting Friday morning when you log in. So that brings us just about to the top of the hour. So thank you everyone for joining. Hope you're all doing well and staying safe, and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie. Thank you everyone for the great questions.